The Baron and the Bella Donna Part 1. Chapter 1. The streets of San Venero. San Venero stirred before dawn, its cobbled veins slick with dew and the scent of spent lantern oil hanging thick in the mist. Narrow alleys twisted like the roots of an old olive tree, leading nowhere quickly, and always under watchful statues of angels and gargoyles clinging to the crumbling facades. Church bells hadn't yet rung, but the city murmured with life anyway, the kind that crept before the respectable world awoke. Lucinda darted through the shadows like a wisp of smoke. She was barefoot, her worn boots tied together and slung across her shoulder like a satchel, a bundle of dried herbs tucked into one and a stolen apple in the other. A patchy scarf covered her dark curls, and a scrap of leather held her makeshift satchel at her hip, full of clinking glass bottles and paper pouches. Her fingers were stained green and brown from nettle and valerian root. Her eyes, sharp as glass splinters, missed nothing. She wasn't a beggar. Not really. She worked, in her way. She knew which cracks in the stone walls yielded time and mugwort. She knew which nuns needed pain tinctures and which old widowers paid a coin for something to help them sleep through their regrets. The city, grim and coughing with fog, was her apothecary. As she crossed the Piazza dell'Ombra, the heart of San Venero's older quarter, she paused near the fountain of Saint Moldi, a forgotten martyr with moss on his shoulders. At the foot of the basin, something glistened beneath a falling leaf. A coin. No. A ruby drop of blood. She stepped closer and saw it, a trail. Small, crimson spots leading into an alley behind the butcher's stall. Her breath caught. An animal, perhaps. Injured. Or something worse. Curiosity flickered before fear. Lucinda didn't spook easily. She followed the trail. The alley narrowed between shuttered shops and a boarded-up puppet theater. Rotten vegetables turned the cobbles slick, and the smell of meat fat lingered heavily in the air. Then, she heard it. A soft, rasping breath. She turned the corner and found it there, crumpled between two overturned crates, a black cat. It was soaked through, matted with blood and rain, one paw twisted unnaturally. But its eyes gleamed like polished amethyst. Not frightened. Not pleading. Just, watching. Lucinda approached slowly, speaking in the hush she reserved for broken-winged birds and frightened children. "Poor thing," she murmured, crouching low. "What happened to you?" The cat made no sound. But its tail, barely visible under its body, flicked once. She took off her scarf and wrapped it gently around the cat, cradling it with the care of someone who had too often been uncared for herself. As she lifted the creature, she felt it shudder, though not in pain. A different kind of tremble. As though the cat were resisting something inside itself. Lucinda paused. "You're no alley scrap, are you?" She didn't expect an answer. But the cat closed its eyes. Almost, regretfully. Back at her hidden corner of the old Orsini chapel ruins, her home for now, Lucinda laid the cat on a blanket made of stitched-together coats. The small fire she kept in a hollowed brick ring cast flickering shadows. Glass bottles lined a wooden crate shelf, most were recycled ink flasks and perfume vials. Dried herbs dangled overhead, fragrant and familiar, rosemary, valerian, angelica root. She cleaned the cat's wound, splinting the twisted paw with the tender grace of someone who knew the pain of healing. All the while, the creature watched her, silent and still. Not a word of thanks, she teased softly, crushing yarrow into a paste. Or at least a growl. Still no sound. As the fire died down and the first hints of morning crept through the broken arch of the ruined chapel, Lucinda sat back, satisfied that the creature would live. She pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders and curled up nearby, exhaustion taking her before she could think of where tomorrow's meal might come from. The cat stood, and began to change. Bones shifted under fur. Shadows wrapped around limbs like coils of smoke. The form twisted, grew, extended. Where paws had been, hands now grasped at the stone floor. Where fur had glistened, flesh emerged, pale and sculpted like marble. Lucinda did not wake to witness it. When dawn finally broke fully, with light dripping down the chapel's ruined windows like gold wine, Lucinda sat up, rubbing her eyes. Her gaze drifted to where the cat had been, and froze. A man stood there. Lean, tall, wrapped in her patchwork blanket, eyes the same piercing violet. He inclined his head, elegant as a prince, though his smile bore the weight of centuries. "Grazie, signorina," he said, voice velvet and regretful. "You saved more than a life tonight." Lucinda's mouth parted, but no sound emerged. The sun struck his features, and in that instant, she knew nothing in San Venero would ever be simple again. Chapter 2: The Black Cat. The ruined chapel felt smaller in the daylight, as though the shadows had receded and left it too exposed, too vulnerable for the secrets it now held. Lucinda stared at the stranger standing where the black cat had been. He stood still as a statue, wrapped in the same ragged blanket she'd used to swaddle the cat. Dark hair fell just past his collarbone, damp and slightly tangled. His features were angular, sharp cheekbones, a strong, Romanesque jaw, but softened by an odd melancholy in his eyes, those same violet irises that had glowed in feline form. "You're him," she said at last, voice hoarse. The man gave a half bow, graceful as if he'd stepped out of a court painting. "I am. Though it is not a name I wear proudly these days." His lips curved, slightly. "Alessandro di Miraglia. Baron of these lands, once." Lucinda backed up a step. "Baron? There's no baron in San Venero. The palace's been sealed for years. No one's seen a soul go in or out. I assure you, I reside there still," he said, with a touch of ironic pride. "Though I am not often myself. Not when it matters." She squinted at him. "What kind of trick is this? You were a cat. I bandaged your paw. You bled on my floor. Now you're quoting titles like some painted aristocrat." "I am cursed," he said simply. The words hung in the chapel air like incense. Heavy, strange, undeniably true. She looked him over again, taller than her by a head, lean muscle evident beneath the blanket, not a single wound on him now. The injured paw, twisted last night, was now a human hand, whole and elegant. The transformation hadn't just healed him. It had made him beautiful. He noticed her staring and dropped his gaze, suddenly solemn. "I didn't mean for you to see me. Or to involve you in this." "Bit late for that," she said warily. "I carried you here. Cleaned your wounds. Thought you were dying." "You did more than that," the Baron said, stepping closer. "You touched me." Lucinda stiffened. "I don't mean physically," he added quickly. "Though, yes. But you touched the curse. Your hands, your herbs, they stirred something. I haven't shifted into a full man in years without pain. But you, when you treated me, it was as though the spell weakened for the first time in decades." Lucinda folded her arms. "And what spell exactly turns a man into a cat?" "A beast," he corrected quietly. "Not always a cat. The form changes, depending on my nature each night. Sometimes fox. Sometimes wolf. But most often feline. It is the most controlled." She was silent a moment, taking that in. "And you don't know who did it to you?" "I did once," he murmured, "but the curse erased that too. I loved someone I should not have. She had power. She bound me to my shame. I remember her voice. Her eyes. But her name, her face, gone." Lucinda swallowed hard. "So every night. I change at dusk. I remain that way until sunrise. Unless something disrupts the magic." He gave her a look laced with meaning. "Like you." She glanced down at her hands, now stained with herbs and ash. "I'm no sorceress. Just a hedge healer." "Perhaps," the Baron said. "But perhaps not entirely. Lucinda felt a flicker of unease in her chest. She'd always known things she wasn't taught. Which leaves numbed pain without poison? Which flowers bloomed under moonlight? And she always knew when someone was lying, even if they used beautiful words. I should leave, he said suddenly. Before sunset. She blinked. Why? If I'm here, and I change again, I may not be myself. And I would not forgive myself if I harmed you. He moved toward the chapel entrance, blanket still around his shoulders like a nobleman's cape. Lucinda followed, arms crossed. So what, are you going back to your palace to hide? He turned back to look at her, those strange violet eyes glinting in the sunlight. Yes, he said quietly. And to wait. For the day when someone finds a way to end this. Lucinda stepped forward, hands on her hips. And if someone already did? The Baron paused. You said I changed something, she continued. Well, maybe I can do more. Maybe I can help. He looked at her long and hard. Then, without a word, he reached into the folds of the blanket and drew out something she hadn't noticed, a silver ring with a black opal, its surface flickering like storm clouds. He handed it to her. I once gave this to the one who cursed me, he said. If it burns when you touch it, leave San Venero tonight. If it does nothing, come to the palace tomorrow. After sundown. There is something I want to show you. Lucinda took the ring. It was cold. Solid. It did not burn. But it pulsed in her palm. Like it remembered her. When she looked up again, the Baron was gone, vanished into the fog as though he'd never been there. But he had. And the world would never be the same again. Chapter 3 Midnight Transformation. The moon over San Venero rose full and solemn, draped in veils of mist. Its light spilled over rooftops, clattered on cobblestones, and spilled into alleys like melted silver. From the sea-facing bell tower of the old cathedral, time rang out in 12 slow tolls. Midnight. Lucinda lay awake in her makeshift cot inside the ruined chapel, staring up at the exposed ribs of the ceiling. She hadn't removed the ring. Not even once. It now hung around her neck on a leather cord, nestled against her collarbone like a secret. It hadn't burned. It hadn't glowed. But it hadn't felt ordinary either. She felt it pulse sometimes, when she touched yew bark, or when the wind carried rosemary across her path. As if it were remembering something. Or someone. She rose, restless, and wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. The fire had long since burned to embers. Outside, the city was asleep, or pretending to be. San Venero always dreamed uneasy dreams. Lucinda took to the narrow back lanes, avoiding the moonlight. She didn't know exactly where she was going. She only knew she had to see him again. To understand. To prove it wasn't madness that whispered in her blood. The Miraglia Palace loomed beyond the merchant district, shrouded in ivy and high iron gates. Its windows were mostly dark, except for a single flickering light in a tower room near the southern wing. The gates, rusted from years of disuse, creaked open when she pushed, not locked at all. She passed through the overgrown gardens, statues of mourning angels overrun with vines, roses strangled by thistle. The air here tasted different. Still. Suspended. Then she heard it. A cry. Not quite animal. Not quite human. Lucinda quickened her pace, following the sound into the lower courtyard, where a stone path wound through a broken hedge maze. Beneath the arch of a dying wisteria trellis, she found him. The Baron. Or what was left of him. His form hunched in the shadows, cloaked in shifting, restless black. Fur rippled across his back like wind over a lake. Claws scraped at the flagstones. A low, guttural growl shook from deep in his chest. His violet eyes, even altered, still shone, burning from a face somewhere between man and beast. He didn't see her. Or perhaps he couldn't. Lucinda remained frozen, breath caught in her throat. His body twisted violently, falling to his knees as the transformation completed, long limbs bent into feline precision, a panther's grace merging with a man's tragedy. This was no ordinary shape-shifting. It wasn't clean. It was a tearing, warping thing, and when it was done, the creature that remained knelt at the garden's center, panting. Lucinda stepped forward. "Baron." The creature looked up, snarling first, then froze. Recognition flickered in its eyes. The growl died. Slowly, deliberately, it backed away from her, slipping into the shadows of the garden. She followed. "Wait, please." He kept to the darkness, his inhuman shape barely visible under the moonlight. But his steps slowed. Eventually, he stopped beneath the marble gazebo at the garden's center, its roof half collapsed and laced with moss. She approached carefully. "It's you," she said. "Even now. I can see it." The creature gave a low, rumbling sound, half laugh, half sigh. Then it spoke. "Barely." Lucinda. Her name, mangled by a beast's throat, still sounded heartbreakingly human. She knelt beside him. He let her. "What is this?" she asked. "Why suffer like this every night?" He looked away. His voice, when it came again, was clearer, still raspy, but intelligible. "A punishment. For loving someone. I was forbidden to love. She was powerful. More than I knew." Lucinda stared at him, lips parting. "The witch?" He nodded once. "She said she would bind me to the form that matched my true self. I became this. A reflection of all I tried to hide." Lucinda was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out, gently laying her fingers on the creature's shoulder. The fur beneath was warm. Trembling. "You're not a monster," she said. He let out a breath, shaky, uncertain. "Then why does the world forget me every day? Why do I return to the same emptiness? Why do I still wait for her?" Lucinda's hand tensed slightly on his shoulder. "Maybe," she said softly, "you're waiting for the wrong person." They sat in silence, moonlight bathing the gazebo ruins around them. The city beyond slept, unaware that a cursed noble and a forgotten herbalist had just crossed into something neither could name yet. Not love. Not quite. But the first fragile stirrings of it. The creature slowly lay down, head bowed near her knee, and Lucinda stayed with him until dawn began to lighten the sky. As the first light crept over the rooftops of San Venero, she watched the transformation reverse, quietly this time. Fur melted into skin. Claws pulled back into fingers. When it was over, Baron di Miraglia slumped against a pillar, pale and breathless. Lucinda pulled her shawl tighter around him. He looked up at her, worn and grateful. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," she said. "Someone needs to remember." And in that moment, under the fading stars, a strange pact was made between them, one born not of duty or spellcraft, but of a shared loneliness deep as any curse. Chapter 4: A Curse Remembered. Dawn bathed San Venero in muted gold, filtering through iron balconies and shuttered windows, casting long, theatrical shadows on the streets below. But in the southern wing of the long-abandoned Miraglia Palace, time did not progress. It folded in on itself like a half-forgotten waltz. Lucinda sat at a tall window with cracked glass, half wrapped in a velvet curtain she'd pulled free from the rod. The Baron lay resting on the fainting couch nearby, covered in a faded brocade coverlet, his breath even but shallow. The transformation always left him weakened, drained in ways she couldn't yet heal with tinctures and herbs. She watched him sleep. Now that she had time to truly look, she could see the details most never would, the way his hands twitched faintly as if dreaming of claws, the shadows beneath his eyes that had nothing to do with sleep, the faint shimmer along his skin where the beast still lingered, like an echo. Lucinda whispered to herself, what kind of love did this? The Baron stirred. Slowly, his eyes opened. Violet, always violet, whether in beast or man. He sat up with effort. You stayed. I told you I would, she said simply. He watched her for a long moment. I don't remember anyone staying before. Lucinda approached, kneeling beside him. Then start remembering. A weak smile touched his lips. But there was something else behind it now, a distant sadness that tugged like a riptide. I used to know, he said quietly, eyes drifting toward the cracked ceiling, who she was. The one who cursed me. Lucinda stiffened, just slightly. He went on. She wasn't just a witch. She was someone I loved. Or thought I did. It was forbidden. I don't remember why. Family. Status. Power. Something. He leaned forward, fingers laced together tightly. But I loved her. I remember that. Lucinda looked down at her hands. What happened? She told me we'd run away, he said, voice turning hollow. Escape San Venero. Leave behind the court, the secrets, the expectations. I believed her. I met her in the garden the night before we were to leave. She kissed me. Said she loved me. His jaw tightened. And then she whispered the curse. She said it was to teach me what it felt like to be forgotten. To be hunted. To be feared. Lucinda's breath caught. The Baron rose shakily and walked toward a glass cabinet in the corner of the chamber. Its wood was warped with moisture, but the contents remained preserved: trinkets, dried flowers, a music box carved in the shape of a Bella Donna blossom. He opened it. The soft, eerie melody filled the room. This was hers, he said. She used to hum it. After the curse, I couldn't bear to destroy it. Lucinda looked around the room, opulent, but untouched by joy. Dust lay on the surfaces like a shroud. Nothing had been added or removed in years. A tomb disguised as a drawing room. Do you remember her name? She asked. He shook his head. No. That's part of it. The curse devoured her face from my memory. I see only fragments now. Her hands. Her voice. I think she had eyes like yours. Lucinda's breath came short, a quiet flutter in her chest. And you've never found her again? I've searched. But time twists when you're half a beast. I forget things. I lose whole months. People who knew me are dead or gone. And none of them remember her. None of them remember me. She stepped forward. I remember you. The Baron looked at her, something flickering in his expression. You shouldn't. But I'm glad you do. Silence stretched between them, warm, tentative. Then Lucinda asked softly, what if the curse wasn't only punishment? What if it was protection, too? He blinked. From what? From yourself. From losing your humanity. Or maybe, from a truth you weren't ready to face. The Baron laughed, a soft, broken sound. What truth? Lucinda held his gaze. That you might have loved the wrong person. Or that she never loved you at all. He turned away then, pained. That's cruel. No, Lucinda said gently. It's a guess. A dangerous one. He didn't speak for a while. Then, very quietly, you're not like the others. Lucinda gave a small, dry laugh. No. I'm not. I talk to weeds and sell headache cures from a pickle jar. He turned back to her, solemn. And yet, when I changed last night, it wasn't agony. It was quieter. As if something had dulled the blade of the curse. Lucinda stepped closer. Maybe I'm part of it. The Baron gave her a puzzled look. What do you mean? She hesitated, then touched the ring at her neck. The ring. The way your transformation changed when I was near. I think, maybe this curse isn't finished yet. Maybe it's waiting for something. They looked at each other, both on the edge of something deeper than they could name. Come back tonight, the Baron said finally, his voice almost a whisper. To the garden. Where I last saw her. I want to show you something. Lucinda nodded once. Then she turned and left the palace, heart heavy with questions, none of them more urgent than the one rising like sap in spring. Why did she feel like she'd been here before? Chapter 5. The garden trysts begin. Twilight returned to San Venero in a hush of lavender and smoke. Street lamps bloomed to life one by one, little amber fireflies caged in iron and glass. The hum of merchants gave way to whispers, the clack of hooves, the ringing of distant bells from a convent tucked behind the harbour walls. Lucinda crossed the palace gates again that evening, alone and unseen, the Baron's silver ring warm against her chest like a heartbeat that was not hers. The gardens behind Miraglia Palace had once been magnificent. You could still tell. Massive stone planters lined the walkways, now bursting not with roses but with stubborn weeds and wild mint. Cracked fountains still burbled faintly, fed by some forgotten underground stream. Topiaries had collapsed into tangled hedges. Pergolas stood skeletal, entwined with dead vines that caught the moonlight like strands of spun glass. It was in this haunted Eden that she found him. The Baron, no longer in beast form, waited by a marble sundial swallowed by moss. He was cloaked in a dark embroidered coat, the kind nobility once wore when promenading through their lands. In the moonlight, he looked sculpted from sorrow and starlight. You came, he said, as though he hadn't been certain she would. I said I would, Lucinda replied. She walked toward him, each step brushing aside fallen petals from flowers long dead. He gestured for her to follow. They wandered together through the garden, not speaking at first. The moon overhead filtered down through the tattered branches of ancient trees, dappling their path in silver. Fireflies blinked lazily around them, and the perfume of night jasmine, the one living thing that still thrived, hung in the air like a memory. I used to walk here every night, he said finally, voice low. Before I was cursed. I'd bring books. Or wine. Sometimes lovers. Lucinda raised an eyebrow. Plural. He smiled, rueful. This was before I understood the difference between love and possession. She glanced at him sidelong. And now? Now, he said, I understand regret. They reached a small clearing at the garden's center. In the middle stood a wrought iron archway choked with ivy. Beneath it, a stone bench curved in a half-moon. Nearby, a dying plum tree reached toward the sky like a skeleton caught mid-dance. She waited here, the Baron said. The night she cursed me. We were to leave at midnight. I came early. I brought a ring, that ring. He looked down at the silver circle around Lucinda's neck. And I waited. Lucinda sat on the bench, the stone cool against her skirts. She arrived late, he continued. She kissed me. Whispered her love. And then, before I could even kneel, she spoke the words. Ancient words. I didn't know their meaning. Not until I felt my hands become claws. Lucinda reached into her satchel, retrieving a small vial. May I? She asked. He blinked. What is it? Starflower oil. Calms the nerves. Just a few drops on the pulse. He extended his wrist without hesitation. Lucinda dabbed it gently along the inside of his skin. The moment her fingers touched him, a shimmer passed between them, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. He felt it too. His breath hitched. Is that the oil? He asked. She shook her head slowly. No. That's something else. A long silence followed. They remained there, side by side beneath the arch, neither speaking. A pair of owls hooted in the distance. Somewhere in the city, a clock struck the hour, 10. Lucinda finally broke the silence. Do you still love her? The Baron didn't answer right away. Then, I loved what I thought she was. But the truth is, I don't remember enough to know if it was real. That's the worst part. Not the curse. Not the pain. It's that I doubt my own memory of love. Lucinda looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe love isn't something you remember. Maybe it's something you choose, every day. He turned to her, eyes catching the moonlight. And if I've already chosen once? Then maybe, she said, you get to choose again. Something passed between them then, not a spell, not yet love, but a thread. Invisible, unspoken. A quiet promise. From that night on, the garden became their sanctuary. Each evening, just after sundown, Lucinda would slip past the rusted gates. And there, amid ivy and silence, she and the Baron would walk, talk, and unearth their histories like buried seeds. She brought herbs and stories. He brought old music and memories from a world that had tried to forget him. One night, he played a viola beneath the plum tree. Another, she read him verses from a book of forgotten poetry written by a woman named Bella Donna. Neither of them yet knew how much that name would come to matter. But for now, they walked through shadows and moonlight. Beast and girl. Baron and herbalist. Man and mystery. And something between them began to bloom. Chapter 6 Masquerade Rumors. Word in San Venero traveled not in letters or proclamations, but in whispers and the flick of fans behind lace. It wove its way through meat stalls and bakeries, through candlelit salons and the perfume-scented parlors of fading nobility. And now, it carried a singular, impossible message. The Baron di Miraglia was hosting a masquerade. Lucinda first heard the rumor while purchasing dried saffron from a spice merchant in the Via dell'Abbondanza. The merchant, a plump woman with 3 missing teeth and an ear for gossip, leaned over the counter and whispered, "Swear on Saint Meraldi's stone finger, girl, the palace gates will open." First time in 20 years. Lucinda blinked, stunned. The palace. Miraglia himself, the woman continued, eyes wide. The cursed one, they say. The Black Baron, the one who hasn't aged a day. Another voice chimed in, an old man threading lavender stems into wreaths nearby. Bah! He's a ghost. Or a devil. Or both. I heard he's got a snake's tongue and sleeps in a crypt lined with mirrors so he can remember what he used to be. Lucinda forced a casual shrug, though her heartbeat had picked up. People say anything about those old families. It's probably just the magistrate throwing a party in his name to distract from the grain shortages. But deep inside, she knew the truth. The Baron had summoned her just 2 nights prior to walk again through the garden. Their conversations had turned softer, closer, tinged with a kind of yearning neither dared name. And now this, a ball. A grand one. Public. Official. Announced through whispers rather than printed invitations. And very likely, for her. She left the stall and moved through the market in a daze. Every corner she turned, she heard pieces of the same story. Gold was delivered to the tailors this morning. Silks from Venice. And masks. Venetian glass. They say he'll appear at midnight. Unmasked. Lucinda's thoughts turned swiftly. Why would he host a ball now, after decades of seclusion? Was it a trap? A signal? Or, a test? That evening, back in her ruined chapel with the wind whistling through the hollow nave, Lucinda laid out a small spread of pressed herbs and scribed her thoughts in a tattered ledger she used to keep her tincture notes. Baron di Miraglia is preparing for something. Something large. Something final. Does he mean for me to come? And what role do I play? The ring he had given her still hung around her neck, pulsing faintly whenever she held it between her palms. A feeling had been growing, quiet, steady, that she wasn't just involved by chance. She belonged to this story. Even if she didn't yet know how. In the days that followed, the rumors grew louder. Taverns buzzed with talk of the Baron's return to society. Seamstresses were seen working by candlelight at all hours. A florist sent cascading blooms of nightshade and lily of the valley to the palace gates. A perfumer created a new scent inspired by the occasion, moonborn velvet, a blend of myrrh and rose laced with iron. Lucinda began to notice signs, strange ones. Birds gathering in pairs on her windowsill at dusk. A moth with silver-speckled wings fluttering inside her apothecary bag. The Bella Donna plant growing wild in the chapel's corner, blooming prematurely with bruised purple flowers. All of it pointed towards something building, tightening like the string of a bow. Then, one night beneath the garden's pergola, the Baron confirmed it. "You've heard the rumors, I assume," he said, voice calm but distant. Lucinda nodded. "You're holding a masquerade." His eyes didn't meet hers. "I am." "Why?" He looked up at the stars. "Because the spell tightens. I feel it each night," the beast claws deeper. "I am running out of time, Lucinda." Her breath caught. "So this is an ending." "It might be." He turned toward her then, voice suddenly low, almost pleading. "But if there's a chance, even the slimmest, that the curse can be broken before it consumes me, it will happen that night." She stepped closer. "How?" "I don't know. But you'll be there." He paused. "Won't you?" Lucinda didn't answer immediately. The moon caught on his features, so beautiful, so fragile in his silence. Then she said, simply, "Yes." And so the city prepared. The cobblers, tailors, jewelers, dancers. Everyone had heard the whisper, the Black Baron was returning. The palace gates would open for the first time in 20 years. There would be firelight, music, masks, and perhaps something no one could name. But only Lucinda knew the truth. The ball was not just a celebration. It was a summoning. And she had already answered it. Chapter 7: Alchemy and the Hidden Room. The Miraglia Palace had its secrets. That much Lucinda had already learned in her evenings with the Baron, gliding through overgrown gardens, wandering candlelit halls, and tracing the dust-lined portraits of forgotten ancestors with her fingertips. But tonight, something was different. The air was thicker. The shadows deeper. Even the silence seemed to murmur. They had been walking the western corridor, one of the oldest wings of the palace. It smelled of iron and lavender rot, and Lucinda could see remnants of a time before the curse, a harp broken at the base of a spiral stair, sconces shaped like sunbursts, the worn outline of a fresco above them where a painted angel had once hovered. The Baron moved ahead of her, lantern in hand. His coat swept the floor behind him, a dark whisper of fabric that echoed his voice when he finally said, "There's a place I haven't been in years. It belonged to someone I trusted. Before everything changed." "Someone who knew magic?" Lucinda asked. He hesitated. "Someone who practiced it." "An alchemist." Lucinda's pace slowed. "Alchemy. Not quite witchcraft, not quite science. A discipline of symbols and secrets, half translated from the stars. She'd encountered fragments of it before, etched into old manuscripts, carved on hidden stones in the chapel ruins, but it had always felt just beyond reach. Too precise. Too ancient. Too dangerous. The Baron stopped before a tall, arched door at the end of the corridor. There were no handles, no hinges. Just smooth black oak beneath a dust-cloaked chandelier. He raised the lantern and pressed his palm to the door. It didn't open. Instead, a soft click sounded in the floor. Lucinda stepped back instinctively as the tiles beneath her feet shifted. With a slow groan of stone against stone, a spiral stair emerged from the floor itself, descending downward into the dark. "I never found it," he murmured. "Not until the curse began. I don't know how I missed it." He turned to her. "Do you wish to come?" Lucinda met his gaze. "I'm already here, aren't I?" He smiled faintly, something between sadness and trust. Together, they descended. The passage led them deep beneath the palace, into earth-scented dark. The air grew colder as they wound downward, the stone staircase growing narrower, slick with condensation. Finally, they emerged into a circular chamber lit by a single flickering crystal embedded in the ceiling. The walls were covered in alchemical glyphs, pulsing faintly in tones of gold, rust, and violet. The light seemed to breathe. Lucinda's breath caught. The room was unlike anything she had ever seen. Glass tubes spiraled from floor to ceiling. Copper instruments with dials spun lazily in place. A large oak table stood at the center, its surface carved with symbols, many familiar to Lucinda from her herbal studies, but layered here with deeper meanings. Mercury, salt, sulfur, unity, forgetting, desire. And at the far end of the room, a mural had been painted into the very stone, faded but still visible. It depicted a woman in dark green robes standing beneath a tree made of bone, her hands raised to a pale moon. Lucinda stepped closer, heart pounding. Her own face stared back at her. Younger, idealized, stylized, but unmistakably hers. The curve of the cheek. The shape of the lips. The sharpness of the eyes. The Baron stood beside her, silent. "I thought I imagined it before," he said softly. "But now I see it. You look exactly like her." Lucinda's fingers trembled. "But I've never been here. I don't know this place." "Maybe not in this life," he said. She turned to him sharply. "What do you mean?" He looked around the room. This was the domain of an alchemist named Lorenzo. He served my family in secret, taught her, my lover, how to work with symbols, potions, memory. He taught her how to curse me. She used this room. Lucinda stepped back from the mural, overwhelmed. "And now I'm here. Descendant of a woman who ruined your life." He looked at her gently. "Are you?" She said nothing. The Baron moved toward a set of dusty tomes laid open on the work table. "Look at this," he murmured. Lucinda came to his side. The pages showed diagrams, of plants, of stars, of vessels shaped like hearts and hands. But more than that, it showed binding magic, a rare and perilous technique where alchemy and enchantment merged to seal a person to a fate they could not outrun. "She used this," he said, tracing the edge of a star drawn over a circle. "This ritual." Lucinda read aloud the Latin etched beneath it, "Oblivio pro amore. Corpus pro voluntate. Memory for love," she translated, voice hollow. "Body for will." She closed the book slowly. "She didn't just curse you. She sacrificed her memory of herself, to ensure the spell held." The Baron's expression darkened. "Or she cursed herself as well. A spell like this demands symmetry." Lucinda felt dizzy. The plants in her hands. The strange dreams she'd had since childhood. The way San Venero sometimes felt familiar even in places she'd never set foot. "I've been part of this longer than I knew," she whispered. The Baron turned to her, voice low but firm. "Lucinda. I don't think you were meant to break the curse. I think you were meant to inherit it." Silence fell between them. Above, far above, the palace held its breath. And below, in the secret chamber of glass and gold, Lucinda felt the truth beginning to stir within her, like a fire waking in dry wood. She wasn't just a healer. She was a key. Chapter 8: The Portrait and the Witch. Lucinda did not sleep that night. She returned to the chapel well past midnight, her hands still trembling from what she had seen, the alchemical glyphs, the mural, the memory-etched tomes, the woman in green robes who bore her face like a mirror made of time. She barely remembered crossing the bridge back into the lower quarter, nor lighting the tiny fire near the apse where she often brewed her teas. She sat wrapped in her shawl, the ring the Baron had given her clutched in her palm like a relic. Its surface now pulsed faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. "I'm not her," she whispered into the dark. I'm not the witch. But the wind didn't answer. Morning rose slowly, heavy with a pale mist that clung to San Venero's stone walls like spider silk. By midday, Lucinda made her way to the Archivio Vecchio, the old city archive, a building that had once been a convent and now served as a repository for records, noble lineages, and, more importantly, paintings. It was here that she hoped to find what the Baron could not remember. The archivist, an elderly man with smudged spectacles and no visible eyebrows, gave her a skeptical once-over as she stepped inside, dirt still on her hem and a sprig of wormwood tucked behind one ear. "You're far from the market, girl," he muttered. "We don't sell tonics here." "I'm not buying," she said, sliding a coin across the desk. "I'm looking for the Miraglia estate records. Any painted family trees? Portraiture from the late 1700s to early 1800s. Especially women." The archivist blinked. "You're serious?" Lucinda met his gaze. "Very." With a grunt, he pushed himself from his stool and disappeared into a labyrinth of shelves lined with yellowed vellum and crumbling paper. Lucinda waited, heart drumming like a war drum behind her ribs. She didn't know what she expected to find, just that something inside her, something ancient and instinctive, told her the answer would not be in spellbooks or potions. It would be in paint. After a long while, the archivist returned with a large folio bound in weathered green leather. Dust bloomed as he set it before her. "Portraits commissioned by the Miraglia family," he explained. "Most were catalogued after the family retreated from public life. Not many visitors ask to see this." Lucinda opened the folio. Page after page revealed painted likenesses, men in powdered wigs, women in stiff gowns with sullen eyes and tightly bound hair. Some bore names in looping calligraphy, others were simply labeled unknown. Her eyes caught on one midway through the volume. A woman in deep forest green. Her hair was loose, unusual for a formal portrait, and black as onyx, tumbling around her shoulders like water at midnight. Her skin was pale but flushed at the cheeks, lips painted with crushed rose. And her eyes, sharp, gold hazel, and watching. Even rendered in oil, they seemed to follow the viewer. Lucinda's heart stopped. The woman in the portrait looked like her. Not in the way cousins or distant family might. But identical. As though the painter had somehow glimpsed Lucinda herself and captured her in another century. Beneath the painting, in faded ink, was a name. Maria Bella Donna. Consort to Baron Alessandro di Miraglia, estimated 1813, disappeared 1815. Consort. Not wife. Lucinda stared at the name. Belladonna, deadly nightshade, the plant that grew wild in her satchel and had followed her through life like a shadow. Used for potions, for poisons, for love spells and curses alike. And Maria, like the poetry book the Baron had once shared with her in the garden. She flipped the folio closed, breath shallow. So it was true. She was descended, or somehow linked, to the woman who had cursed him. Whether by blood or fate or a strange repetition of time, she could no longer pretend otherwise. That night, Lucinda returned to the palace. The Baron met her in the greenhouse ruin, where moonlight filtered through broken glass panes and orchids grew in unexpected corners. He was waiting, tense, like a man prepared to be judged. "I saw her," Lucinda said, stepping into the light. "The portrait. Maria Bella Donna." The Baron's breath caught audibly. "And she's me," Lucinda said softly. "Or was me. I don't know how. I don't know why. But it's not just resemblance. It's something deeper. My dreams, my hands, the herbs I've always known how to use. I think I've been carrying her inside me all my life." The Baron stepped back, as if absorbing a blow. "So it's true," he whispered. "You are her. Or her shadow. Or her legacy." Lucinda nodded, eyes shining with something like fear, or understanding. "Which means this curse, it began with me." "No," the Baron said sharply. He stepped forward, voice fierce now. Don't do that. You are not her. Whatever she did, however she twisted what we had, you are not bound to her cruelty. Lucinda met his gaze, unwavering. But I may be the only one who can undo what she did. The wind stirred through the broken glass above them. Lucinda stepped closer. Let me try. He stared at her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. You may be my undoing, he murmured, but I would rather fall at your hands than be forgotten by them. Above them, the stars wheeled quietly. Below them, in the heart of the palace, the past stirred like a restless ghost, awakening at last. Because every love story deserves a little magic. You've just felt the passion, the heartbreak, and maybe, a spark of destiny. Subscribe for more supernatural love, dramatic twists, and heart-fluttering romance. Like if you believe in second chances and fated mates. Comment your favorite romantic moment, we read them all, and we swoon with you. Ring the bell so you never miss the next magical chapter. Share with a fellow hopeless romantic, you know they're secretly obsessed too. Because here at Supernatural Romance Stories, the moon is always watching, and love always finds a way.